Today we're going to continue on with our series called How Stuff Works, and today's topic is forgiveness. Now we'll get to that in a second, but first of all, I've got my golf club here, and I've just got to say that a few years ago I finally decided I was going to pick up golf. You know, when I was younger, I was an athlete, and I used to make fun of golf and golfers because they called it a sport, and I didn't really think of it as a sport. And then I got old, and now I play golf. And so what I had to figure out a few years back was how golf works. And so I just, I YouTubed it, I checked out some videos, and then I got a golf mat, and I set up a net in my garage, and I just started hitting golf ball after golf ball after golf ball. And the way that I did it at first was just, it's real simple. I did what my dad said any good dad would teach his son to do, at least what you would think a good dad would teach his son to do, which is just, son, swing as hard as you can. And so that's how I golf. Now, some of you might be laughing to yourself right now because you golf, and you know that that's actually not how golf works. And see, this is what blew my mind, is in golf, you don't want to swing as hard as you can. It's actually almost the opposite is true, that you want to be smooth, and smooth is fast, right? Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. And the first few years of my golfing career, man, I just was swinging as hard as I possibly could. It was really unexpected for me to know that you don't swing so fast. Now, the reason I bring all of this golf up is just to say that I think with forgiveness, you might be surprised today to hear that bitterness doesn't work the way you expect it to work. It's a lot like golf. Maybe you think that being unforgiving and angry and, it's resenting someone in your life, and we all have some unforgiveness in our hearts and in our lives. Maybe you think that that's going to make you better. Maybe you think that that's going to satisfy you or make you feel better. But if you've experienced it at all, you'll know what I experienced in golf, and that's that it doesn't really work the way you expect. I mean, if you're bitter and unforgiving, over time, it just hurts you. It doesn't actually help you. The thing that actually brings healing, and it doesn't really make sense, but it's true, the thing that brings satisfaction and healing is very unexpected, like slowing down your golf swing. The thing that brings healing is forgiveness, not bitterness. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's message as we talk about how forgiveness works. So grab your Bible and let's get into it. I don't know what comes to mind for you when you think about unforgiveness or the whole issue of forgiveness, but one of the things that comes to mind for me first is a youth retreat that I was on back when I was in high school. I remember it was just one of those wonderful times when we're worshiping together. A bunch of the students are there together with our youth leaders, and it was just one of those moving weekends. It was probably a Friday night, and the teacher, the youth pastor, was preaching on forgiveness and this message that we're covering today, this topic, and he was talking about being forgiving and sort of extending that forgiveness relationally to people. And one of the things that he said at the end of that Friday night is he said, with everyone praying through this, with everyone's heads bowed and their eyes closed, he said, I just want you to think about if there's someone that you need to forgive, and if that person is here in the room tonight. And I remember sort of praying and bowing my head down and thinking, I want to just examine my heart. I don't feel like I'm very bitter. I'm not a very bitter person or an unforgiving person. And so, when I think about a spectrum, if way over here are people that struggle with bitterness, and way over here are just people that just no problem at all, just happy-go-lucky, I think I'm more over on this side. And so I'm just praying, and nobody's coming to mind, but I'm giving it some time because I think maybe I want to give God an opportunity to really convict my heart. And I've got no one that I feel like I need to forgive. And I remember about 10 minutes into it, I finally just kind of opened my eyes. I was done praying, and I had a line of people lined up to talk to me, to forgive me. And I don't know when you hear that we're talking about forgiveness today, I don't know where you feel like you stand. Are you the guy that's lining up looking to come to say, hey, I need to forgive you. By the way, the reason they were there is they were saying, I need to forgive you, or I need to ask your forgiveness because I was bitter at you because of something that you did. And I just remember just being blown away. I was so clueless to some of the things that I had done that had hurt some of these people's feelings. And so it was kind of an awkward moment there, time after time, for many people in my line, because they were asking for forgiveness, but really they were asking for an apology. Now, I want to bring that up because before we even get in, we've just got 3 basic points today to unpack forgiveness. I want to make sure that we kind of look at forgiveness and sort of break it down and see how do we do this and what is this really all about. But before we even get into any of that, I want to just say to you, don't think about this message in terms of someone else needing, to come to you to apologize. Because really, forgiveness, this whole issue of forgiveness, I want to just isolate, it's just you, right? It's just you and me right now. Forgiveness is not about having someone come to you and ask for forgiveness, because probably they're not going to do that. Forgiveness right now, and I want you to think about this as you get this in your mind, forgiveness today is probably more about something that you're harboring in your heart. It might even be a secret. It might possibly even be something that you haven't even shared with someone else, but in your heart, it's eating you up and you're bitter. Now, maybe some people know about it. Maybe the person that has hurt you knows about it. And maybe it was a pretty big deal. I don't want to minimize it all. I know that there are a lot of wrongs out there, and sometimes people can be jerks. And so I'm not trying to minimize all of this, but what we're going to talk about today is how forgiveness works in your heart. How can you deal with forgiveness when maybe even the other person isn't asking for it? And maybe they are, but maybe they're not even asking for it. That's what happened to me that day. And at that retreat, all these people, I wasn't coming to them. For some reason, God didn't lay it on my heart to go to them. It didn't even come to mind. I was oblivious. Now, these weren't deep hurts, but I was oblivious to these sort of relational hurts. And as these people shared these, it was insightful for me. But I really hope more than anything that it was healing for them to identify that, to release that thing, and hopefully they let it go, because that was 20 plus years ago. So if they haven't let that stuff go, then forgiveness, like that cliche, forgiveness is a poison or unforgiveness, bitterness is a poison that they're drinking that they're hoping kills me, right? I know that's maybe a little cliche, but that's a great way to think of it. It's kind of intense, but it's kind of a great way to think about bitterness and unforgiveness in our heart. If you don't learn how to be forgiving, and that's what we're going to unpack today, if you don't learn how forgiveness works, then it's going to hurt you. I would venture to guess it's going to hurt you a lot more than it's going to hurt the person that you're still bitter at. So with that in mind, I want to take a look at these 3 things. And we're just going to look at 3 things, and we're going to unpack it from God's Word. And hopefully the Spirit of God is going to speak to each one of us about this issue of forgiveness and how forgiveness works. And here's the first thing. Forgiveness is about choosing to release. And I want you to think about that word. I want you to focus on that word. If you need a word today from God on forgiveness, if this is something you're really struggling with, this might be the word I want you to walk away with today. The word is release. Forgiveness is choosing to release. Maybe you need to release your bitterness. You're holding on to it, but you need to release it. Forgiveness is choosing to release it. You might not feel like releasing it. In fact, I'm sure you don't feel like releasing it, but you're going to have to choose to release it. Or maybe you need to release the blame. You want to blame someone for this thing that happened to you. You want to point the finger at someone. You can't, accept it. You don't want it on yourself. You've got to, and forgiveness is choosing to release that desire, that inner desire to point the finger. Or maybe even more intensely, what you need to release is your claim to revenge. For a lot of people, that's what unforgiveness and bitterness is it's just their desire to just hang on to this thing and get revenge, exact revenge. Well, forgiveness is choosing to release that claim. You're releasing the claim. It's almost like you have a claim ticket, and and so someone says, "Hey, who's got the?" And it's me. I've got this one. I deserve this. I've earned this. I have a right to this. Well, forgiveness is relinquishing that right. Maybe you are even right. Maybe somebody has hurt you and it was incredibly unjust. And it was a terrible thing that they did. Well, forgiveness is releasing it and saying, even though I have a right to it, you may or may not, but let's just assume that you do. Even though I have a right to this claim, I release it. I release my right to take vengeance. I release my right, my perceived right to exact justice where there was injustice. Forgiveness is releasing. Take a look at what it says in the Bible. Romans 12:19. Dear friends, never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God. For the scriptures say, I will take revenge. I will pay them back, says the Lord. Now, depending on which side of this forgiveness issue you fall on or the revenge issue you fall on, that could be either a scary verse or a comforting verse. If you're the person who's been wronged, and let's say that someone has just committed a grievous sin against you, and again, there's a lot of that out there. And you've been wronged and you feel that sense, and even when you hear me say that forgiveness is choosing to release, you just say, how dare you tell me that I should release this? This was a big deal. This was a big sin. But that verse says to you, listen, if you would release it, especially if there was a true injustice done, if you would release it, then you're releasing it to God. I know that if someone did something really grievous against me, I would rather God exact revenge, like that verse says, than me, because I'm not that strong. I'm not that powerful. And in fact, that's part of the reason so many people feel bitterness is a lot of times bitterness is because you don't have control. And so you get bitter. You're bitter because you can't exact revenge. You wish you could. In fact, if you could, you probably would. In fact, if you had the power that God has, maybe that person would already have been blasted off of the face of the earth, right? Well, that's why that verse is scary to the person that is really the victimizer, the person that has done that wrong. Boy, if that person has done wrong and they truly have done wrong and they're oblivious to it and they're just going on in life, God is a just God. And this is what he's saying in this verse. Don't try to run around exacting revenge. Trust in God. Trust that vengeance is God's, that it's God's to avenge. It's not yours to avenge. You don't have to be the judge and the jury and the cop and all that stuff all rolled into one. And I know that's hard. It's again, depending on the sin, depending on what somebody's done to you, that's hard. But this is what forgiveness is. It's a choice. It's a choice. It's choosing to release that thing, even though it's difficult to do. Everybody hates a backseat driver, right? You're driving in the car and someone's like, red light, yellow light. Hey, you roll through the stop. Everybody hates a backseat driver. Raise your hand if you hate a backseat driver, right? But listen, what if that backseat driver jumped over your shoulder and grabbed the wheel? How annoying would that be? And that must be how God sometimes feels with us, where he's saying, would you just release this? You're grabbing the wheel, but I'm trying to drive here. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. I'm a better driver than you. Release it. That's what forgiveness is. It's a choice to release. Here's the second thing. Forgiveness is a trained response. Now, I've got my golf club here again, and I talked a little bit about training and how I had to learn how to swing. And one of the things that really sort of shocked me was just how wrong everything that was natural to me. Swing as hard as you can, work really hard. Just really get after it, all that stuff. All of that stuff was so natural to me, and therefore golf was very much not natural to me because golf, if you want to golf well, if you want to golf right, you have to train yourself. When I finally learned how to really swing with my body, with my legs, and when I finally learned the mechanics of a golf swing, and I started thinking more about the way it was supposed to be, and then I started actually doing it more, when I started doing that, man, I had to practice and practice and practice and practice, because golf takes a lot of training. Any sport, if you want to be good at it, takes a lot of training. And forgiveness is the same way. And follow me, track me on this. Forgiveness is a trained response. It's not going to be natural. You're not naturally going to want to forgive. You're naturally going to want to be bitter. Sort of the default way that most of us are wired is we want to be bitter. We want to hold it over your head. We want to be angry at you. We want to be mad at you. Well, that's why you have to train yourself. Because forgiveness is a choice, you have to train yourself to do this. It's not going to come naturally. And this is why Jesus responded like this. In Matthew 18, when Peter came to him and he asked, "Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times?" And Jesus said, no, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Now, I already did the math on this one, and so 70 times 7, if my math is correct, is 490 times. But you need to know that's actually not what Jesus was talking about. He wasn't saying, well, in the 491st time, you don't have to forgive anymore. No, he was using it as a hyperbole, saying these numbers meant something to them back then. He said, no, you should just always forgive. It should just mark your life. Or another way to think of it is like this: it should be a habit. And you can ask my wife, when I first took up golf, I mean, I was swinging. The problem is the first 6 months, every time I swung, and I swung more than 490 times, every time I swung in the garage, every single time I swung, I was actually reinforcing the bad stuff because I hadn't stopped to think about the right way to think about the swing. Now, since then, I've fixed it, but I remember I would watch videos and they would say, you better make sure you're doing this right, because if you're practicing the wrong thing, you're going to get the wrong habits in your mind and in your body, and this is what was happening to me. And forgiveness is the same way. I mean, in your own life, which one are you more practiced at? You don't have to answer that out loud. Are you more practiced at holding a grudge? Which one is more of a habit for you? Because what Jesus is saying here is you should make forgiving a habit. Forgiveness should be the habit. And I'm sure that Peter was like, well, wait, that's not a habit. I'm not natural at that. That's not a habit I'm good at. And Jesus said, well, then get good at it. Go get your clubs and practice and practice and practice, but practice the right thing. Don't practice unforgiveness, bitterness, anger. Practice forgiveness. 70 times 7. And for a lot of people, they think, okay, so this means that there's 490 sins. Let's just run with that. I know it means more than that, but for 490 sins, we should forgive for each one of those. So it's 490 times 1. But, I had a friend who, her husband had cheated on her, and it was a devastating thing. And he felt convicted about it. He repented of it, and they were trying to rebuild their marriage, which is a great thing. And for her, one of the things that she realized about this verse is, that 70 times 7, that's not 490 sins times 1 forgiveness. That's 1 sin times 490 forgivenesses. She said that 1 sin, he was done with that sin. He wasn't going to go back to it. He had repented. His attitude was right. I mean, he felt horrible. He was doing everything he could to restore that marriage. And so now his wife was left with this decision. Is she going to be forgiving? Is she going to forgive? And what she learned was she could forgive in one moment, and later in the day, that same bitterness could creep up into her heart. That same unforgiveness could creep up into her heart or her head. And she had to make the choice to release it. She had to practice this thing. She had to discipline herself. She said, I'm going to practice forgiving. If you struggle with something, I encourage you, when every time that thing comes back up, don't feel like you failed because that thing came back up in your head or in your heart, that feeling of unforgiveness or sadness or bitterness or anger because of some wrong that someone did. You shouldn't feel like you failed if it comes up. What you should feel like is, okay, this is an opportunity for me to practice this habit of forgiveness. Doesn't mean you need to get in line to tell them again, or phone them on the phone, or text them, or Facebook them, or anything like that. It just means that maybe even just in your own heart, maybe in a journal, in your own prayer life, you just need to say, you know what, it came up again, and you can just stop what you're doing and say, I choose again to release this thing. I'm not going to harbor bitterness in my heart. I'm going to release it. I'm going to make forgiveness a habit. Because the good news is, in my golf game, eventually I started hitting the ball a lot better because I started practicing the right thing. But it took a lot of swings to get it down. And in your life, especially if you struggle with unforgiveness, it's going to take a lot of swings. 70 times 7 to get this thing figured out. But you can do it. Here's the third thing. If you're a Christian, forgiveness is not optional. Do you know that forgiveness is something that should just define our lives? Christians should be the people in our society, above everyone else in society, above atheists, agnostics, people of other faiths. Christians above everyone else should be marked by forgiveness. We should be people that freely forgive. Now, I don't think we're generally known as that. I think we're known for other things a lot of times, especially, if there's a church culture, a culture where it's just a very religious culture. A lot of times religious cultures aren't very forgiving. Well, that shouldn't be true of us as followers of Jesus. This should mark us. This should define our lives. And here's why. It says it in Colossians chapter 3. Paul, writing to Christians, he said, since God chose you to be the holy people he loves, you must clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And he said, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Look at that. I'll read it again. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. The reason that we should be forgiving as followers of Christ, and if you're here watching this video and you are not yet a follower of Jesus, maybe you're still wrestling with this concept. But if you're a Christian, if you've accepted Christ and if you've accepted his forgiveness of your sins, then you should be a forgiving person. I mean, it's so fundamental to our identity in Christ that it would be hypocritical of us to accept the forgiveness of Christ. The Lord forgave you. This is what Paul's saying in Colossians. So you should be forgiving. It should just mark your life, or you're being a hypocrite. So you'll receive forgiveness from Jesus, but you won't extend it to other people. So Jesus was willing to extend that grace to you, but you're not willing to extend that grace to someone else. And I know you're probably saying, but you don't understand. You don't understand what someone did to me. And I think all I would say to that is, well, do you understand what you did to Jesus? I mean, when you're saying that, it's because you're only thinking about your perspective as the person being offended. Well, what about if you just think about your perspective as the offender? In fact, I want to close with these 3 questions. If you struggle with this issue, with unforgiveness, and this is a great exercise to do with your family or with your small group or with a mentor this week, especially if you're wrestling with this. A sermon's not going to solve this for you. You've got to talk about this with someone in your life. And so I challenge you to think about these 3 questions. And here's the first one. What's your motivation for not forgiving? Why is it that you're so unwilling to forgive? What's your motivation? Because I would be willing to bet that as you dug in a little bit deeper, you might find that the reason that you're unwilling to forgive is because you're not thinking about someone else. You're only thinking about yourself. Now, again, I know there might be exceptions to this because there are some people out there that have had some very, very sad and terrible things done to them, okay? And I don't want to minimize those things. But I also know there are a lot of people out there where it's just petty stuff, and you're unforgiving, and it's petty, petty stuff. And you need to examine your own heart and say, is that really godly what I'm doing? I'm walking around feeling justified in my bitterness and in my anger, but you're making a big deal out of something that maybe wasn't a big deal. So that's the first question. What's your real motivation? I mean, are you just motivated by self? Is it just a selfish thing? Has bitterness for you in that area has it grown up out of a selfish attitude in your own heart? Here's the second question. Do you really understand grace? I mean, remember, grace means gift. That's what grace is. It's a gift. And so again, we saw this in Colossians 3. Jesus gave us that gift, and so we should give someone else another gift. So if you're waiting for someone to be worthy of your forgiveness, then you've got the whole wrong idea of grace. Jesus didn't wait for us to be worthy of his forgiveness. He extended it. It was a gift. And think about a gift. Is a gift free? Well, it's free to the person receiving it, but it's not free to the person giving it. Maybe that's the reason that you're not extending it, is because it's going to cost you something. Well, that's kind of how grace works. It wasn't free to Jesus. Jesus went to the cross so that we could be forgiven. And there's going to be some hurt. There's going to be some cost to you. You're going to have to be willing to absorb some of the cost of that relational faux pas, or that thing that is just looming over you and that other person in relationship. Someone has got to absorb the cost. And in your unforgiveness, you're not letting anyone absorb the cost. You're hoping they're going to absorb the cost, but you're not going to absorb it, but you are, because bitterness is only hurting you. Why don't you absorb the cost in another way, like Jesus did? Why don't you just rise above it and say, you know what, I'm just willing to release this, and I absorb the cost. Grace hurts. Gifts are costly. Someone has to pay for them. If you're a follower of Jesus, you should be willing to pay for that for the sake of somebody else. Here's the third question I want you to ask. Is your sin really different? You know, again, when we are put ourselves in the place of a victim, and we say, that person sinned against me and I'm a victim and how dare you, and but I just want to ask you, is your sin really that different? Now, maybe you haven't sinned toward that person that you're harboring bitterness toward. Maybe really in your relationship with them, they've really sinned against you. But just in general, is your sin really that different? You know, when Jesus was hanging on the cross, Jesus cried out to the Father. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Now, how about for you? When you hear that, do you say, yeah, Father, forgive them? They're the ones that need forgiveness. They're the ones that need grace, because they're terrible human beings. Don't you realize that when Jesus said, Father, forgive them, he was talking about all of us? He wasn't just talking about the person that has offended you. He was talking about the whole human race. You know, we're all broken. We're all sinners. Now, there are different degrees, but we're all broken. Every one of us needs that forgiveness that Jesus has extended to us. And if you're a Christian, you should be willing to extend it to someone else. You know, I want to just close with this thought. If you're listening to this and you have never received the forgiveness that Jesus offers to you, you can do that today. You know, we talk about this in our first lesson in Foundations. We say that we start a relationship with God by trusting Jesus. We don't start a relationship with God by cleaning up our act and being a better person. We start a relationship with God when we realize that we're broken and we have a sin problem, and we realize that Jesus is handing out this free gift. The Bible says that if we would receive it, that he would give us his forgiveness and new life and everything that comes with it. And if you're here today and you've never experienced that before, I invite you to do that today. But if you're here today and you have experienced that, and you are not allowing someone else to experience it, you're harboring forgiveness maybe because you just didn't realize how it worked. Well, now you know. And I just pray that you will extend that to people in your life. Let's pray. God, I pray that you would help us to hear your words and hear this message. God, I know this message is challenging for so many people, especially for someone who has truly had a great injustice done to them. And I pray that you would just give them grace to receive this and somehow extend forgiveness, even though maybe that other person is still in the wrong. But God, I pray for those that are here today that maybe some of the sins against them haven't really been that big of a deal, but we've blown it out of proportion. And God, whatever the case is, I pray that we would be people who are forgiving, God, because you are so forgiving and gracious and kind and loving toward us, that we would turn around and in every one of our relationships would live in the light of your relationship with us. God, that the way you treat us would be the way that we treat others, with grace and kindness and tender-hearted mercy and compassion and forgiveness. And so we receive your forgiveness, and God, we ask you to give us the strength to extend it to others in Jesus' name. Amen.